The outer rim was the edge of known space. It was a place of cold stars and empty systems. Most of the galaxy called it the last frontier. For thousands of years, only a few alien species had the courage to live there. It was far from the safety of the galactic core. It was far from the laws of the Galactic Council. Ships could vanish there and no one would come looking. Humans loved the outer rim. They had only been part of the wider galaxy for 100 years, but they had built more colonies on the rim than any other species. Human miners dug into asteroids that other species called cursed. Human farmers grew crops on moons that other species called dead. Human traders flew old, patched up ships through routes that other species called too dangerous. The Rim Alliance, the group of species who controlled trade routes and resource claims in that region, did not like this. Humans were new. Humans were pushy. Humans did not always follow the old customs. Worst of all, humans were successful. In 100 years, human colonies in the Outer Rim had grown faster than any Rim Alliance colony had grown in 1,000 years. On a cold morning by Earth reckoning, the Galactic Council called an emergency session. The session was held on Sarah Station, a massive ring-shaped station that floated between 3 systems. Delegates from over 40 species arrived. Their ships filled the docking bays. Their translators buzzed with tension. Ambassador Voth Kal of the Tanar'ri species stood at the center podium. He was tall, with gray skin and 4 eyes that could each look in a different direction. He had been fighting against human expansion for over 20 years. Today, he finally had the votes he needed. "Fellow members of this council," Voth Kal said, his voice amplified across the chamber, "we must speak of the humans." A murmur passed through the crowd. Many species turned to look at the small human delegation seated near the back. There were only 3 humans present. One was Ambassador Elena Cruz, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back tight. Beside her sat 2 junior aides, both looking nervous. "For 100 years," Voth Kal continued, "the humans have expanded into the outer rim without limit. They have taken resource claims that belong to older species. They have built colonies on worlds that other species wished to develop. They have disrupted trade routes that took generations to establish. This cannot continue." Elena Cruz stood up. "Ambassador Voth Kal, every colony my people have built has followed council law. Every claim we have made was open and unclaimed. We have broken no rules." "You have broken no written rules," Voth Kal said. "But you have broken the spirit of cooperation. You expand too fast. You grow too strong. The rim was meant to be shared slowly, carefully between species who have earned their place there over centuries. Humans have not earned anything. You arrived and you took." Around the chamber, many delegates nodded. Not all species disliked humans. The Renu, a small furry species known for their skill in shipbuilding, had worked closely with human engineers for decades and often defended them. The Calissi, a species of tall insectoid traders, had made great profits selling parts to human colonies and saw no reason to stop. But the largest and oldest species, the Tanar'ri, the Dorun, the Phaeax, had grown afraid of how fast humanity was rising. Fear, more than logic, ruled the chamber that day. Voth Kal raised a data pad. "I propose a formal vote. I propose that all human ships, human colonies, and human citizens be banned from operating in the Outer Rim territories, effective in 30 standard days. Existing human colonies will be given that time to evacuate or transfer ownership to council-approved species." Gasps filled the chamber. Even some of the delegates who disliked humans had not expected such a harsh proposal. 30 days was almost no time at all. Entire colonies of thousands of people would need to leave everything behind. Elena Cruz felt her stomach drop, but she kept her face calm. She had trained for this moment for years. She had always known this day might come. "This is an act of war," she said quietly, but her translator carried the words clearly. "No," Voth Kal said. "This is an act of law. The Council has full authority to regulate territory within its jurisdiction. Humanity is a member species. Humanity must obey Council law, the same as everyone else." The vote was called. Species after species raised their markers. The Tanar'ri voted yes. The Dorun voted yes. The Phaeax voted yes. The Renu voted no. The Khaleesi abstained, too afraid of losing trade with the larger species to vote against them. When the count was finished, the ban had passed with a clear majority. Elena Cruz did not argue further. She knew that outbursts would achieve nothing here. She simply nodded, gathered her aides, and left the chamber. Behind her, the council moved on to other business, as if nothing important had happened at all. News of the ban reached Earth within hours, carried by faster-than-light relay drones. It spread across every human world within a day. On Earth, in the offices of the United Earth Government, the reaction was calm on the surface but tense underneath. The President of Earth, a quiet man named Marcus Ibe, called an emergency meeting of his cabinet. 30 days, said the Secretary of Colonial Affairs, a woman named Dr. Priya Nathan. 30 days to evacuate or hand over 312 colonies. Some of those colonies have over 100,000 people. This is not possible. It is not meant to be possible, President Ibe said. It is meant to break us. If we cannot evacuate in time, the Council will say we broke their law. If we hand our colonies to the Rim Alliance, we lose everything we built. Either way, we lose. Around the table, faces were grim. Admiral Rosa Chen, head of the small but growing Earth Defense Fleet, spoke next. Sir, our fleet cannot fight the Rim Alliance. They have more ships, older technology in some ways, but far greater numbers. If this becomes a war, we will lose badly. No one is talking about war, President Ibe said. There will be no war. Then what do we do? Dr. Nathan asked. President Ibe was quiet for a long moment. He looked out the window of the meeting room, toward the sky, where somewhere far away, humanity's colonies were now under threat. We do what humans have always done when someone tries to push us out of a place with rules, he said. We use the rules against them. He turned to a man sitting quietly at the end of the table. This man was not a politician or a soldier. His name was Tobias Reyes, and he was the director of the Earth Economic Council, the group that managed trade, banking, and financial policy for the entire human sphere. Tobias, President Ibe said, how much does the Outer Rim actually cost? The room went silent. Tobias Reyes blinked, surprised by the question. Sir, do you mean the value of the resources there? I mean the whole thing, President Ibe said. The land claims, the mining rights, the trade routes, the debts owed by Rim Alliance governments, all of it. What would it cost to simply buy the Outer Rim? For a moment no one spoke. Then Admiral Chen let out a short, surprised laugh. Sir, you cannot buy a region of space. It does not work that way. Can't we? Tobias Reyes said slowly, his mind already working. He pulled up data on his personal screen, scanning through old economic reports. Sir, actually this might be possible. Let me explain. He stood up and activated the room's main display. A map of the Outer Rim appeared, covered in small labels showing star systems, colonies, and territories. The Rim Alliance species do not truly own most of this territory the way we think of ownership. Most of it is held through mining leases, trade route licenses, and colonial development rights issued by the Council itself generations ago. Many of these leases are old. Many of them are in debt. The species holding them borrowed heavily to build their infrastructure, and much of that debt is owed to independent banks, not to their own governments. Independent banks that we could buy, Dr. Nathan said, catching on. Independent banks that we could buy, Tobias Reyes agreed. If we quietly purchase enough debt, enough mining leases, enough trade licenses, we would not need to fight for the Rim. We would simply own it, legally, under Council law, the very law they just used against us. Admiral Chen leaned forward. That is either brilliant or insane. It might be both, Tobias Reyes said, allowing himself a small smile. President Ibe nodded slowly. Then we begin immediately, quietly, no public statements, no press releases. We do not want the Council to know what we are doing until it is done. Tobias, you will lead this. Use every credit Earth has. Use every bank, every company, every trade contact we possess. I want the Outer Rim in human hands before the Council even realizes what has happened. "And the 30-day evacuation order?" Dr. Nathan asked. "We follow it," President Ibe said. "Publicly, we will begin evacuating our colonies exactly as ordered. Let the Council see weakness. Let them see humans packing up and leaving, exactly as they wanted. While the galaxy watches ships loaded with human families leaving the Rim, Tobias's people will be buying the ground those ships are leaving from." Over the next 30 days, the galaxy watched something strange unfold. Human transport ships moved through the Outer Rim, exactly as ordered, carrying families, workers, and equipment away from colonies that had taken years to build. News networks across 100 alien worlds broadcast images of tired human children looking out of ship windows at colonies they would never see again. Many species felt a flicker of guilt. Others felt only satisfaction that the pushy newcomers were finally being put in their place. But behind the scenes, a different operation moved just as fast. Tobias Reyes worked almost without sleep, coordinating a network of human banks, trading companies, and quiet agents scattered across a dozen systems. Human economists who had spent years studying Rim Alliance financial systems went to work. They found old debts owed by the Dorun mining guilds. They found trade licenses held by struggling Phaex shipping companies who were desperate for credit. They found land leases owned by small independent operators who had no loyalty to the Rim Alliance and were happy to sell to anyone who paid well. Money moved quietly through shell companies with names that meant nothing to anyone who did not look closely. A bank on a distant human colony bought debt from a Dorun mining guild that was drowning in unpaid loans. A trading company registered on Mars purchased mineral rights across 6 systems from a Phaex shipping firm that needed cash immediately. None of these transactions seemed connected. None of them raised alarms. The Rim Alliance species who sold their debts and licenses had no idea that all these small, separate buyers were secretly working for the same government, 400 light-years away. By the 20th day, Earth had quietly gained control of enough debt and licenses to influence more than half the Outer Rim's economic infrastructure. By the 25th day, that number had grown to nearly 70%. Tobias Reyes barely left his office. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but his hands did not stop moving across his data screens. On the 29th day, one day before the deadline, Alina Cruz stood once again before the Galactic Council. This time, the chamber was crowded, filled with delegates eager to see the humans formally admit defeat. Vothkal stood at the podium, looking pleased with himself. "Ambassador Cruz," he said, "I trust your people have completed the evacuation as ordered." "Our colonies have been evacuated exactly as your council demanded," Alina Cruz said calmly. "Every human ship has left Outer Rim space exactly on schedule." A ripple of satisfaction passed through the chamber. Some delegates even offered polite applause, the kind given to a defeated opponent who had at least followed the rules with dignity. "Then this matter is concluded," Vothkal said. "The Outer Rim will return to proper management under Rim Alliance authority." Alina Cruz allowed herself a small, thin smile. "Ambassador, I believe there is one small matter you may have overlooked." Vothkal's 4 eyes narrowed. "And what matter is that?" "The Outer Rim was never truly managed by Rim Alliance authority," Alina Cruz said. "It was managed through mining leases, trade licenses, and colonial development debts, most of which were owned by independent banks and companies. Companies that were free to sell their holdings to whoever offered a fair price." The chamber went quiet. Vothkal's confidence flickered just slightly. "What are you suggesting, Ambassador?" Alina Cruz reached into her jacket and pulled out a data pad. She placed it on the podium and activated the main display for the entire chamber to see. A new map of the Outer Rim appeared, this one covered not in Rim Alliance colors, but in a soft blue color that every species in the room recognized as the color of Earth. "I am not suggesting anything," Alina Cruz said. "I am informing this council, as required by law, that as of this morning, the United Earth government holds legal ownership of the mining leases, trade licenses, and outstanding development debts covering 94% of Outer Rim territory. The chamber erupted into noise. Delegates shouted over one another in a dozen different languages. Voth Kal stood frozen at the podium, his gray skin turning a pale shade that meant deep shock among his species. "This is impossible," he finally managed to say. "This is a trick, this cannot be legal." Every transaction was conducted openly, through legal channels recognized by council law, Elena Cruz said. "The very law your council used to remove our colonies from the Rim is the same law that allowed us to purchase it. We have broken no rules, Ambassador. We have simply played the game more carefully than you expected." Somewhere in the chamber, a Renu delegate let out a small, surprised laugh, quickly covering her mouth with one furry hand. A few other delegates exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to be angry or impressed. Voth Kal slammed a fist against the podium. "The council will not accept this. We will vote to reverse these transactions. We will." "You are welcome to try," Elena Cruz said, her voice still calm. "But I would remind this council that seizing legally purchased property without compensation would violate at least 11 articles of council commercial law, the same laws that protect every species in this chamber, including your own. If the council chooses to break its own laws to punish humanity, I wonder how many of your trading partners will still trust this council tomorrow." Silence spread through the chamber, heavier than before. Every species there depended on council law to protect their own trade deals, their own debts, their own property. If the council broke its own rules for humans today, it could break them for anyone tomorrow. Voth Kal stood at the podium, breathing hard, searching for words that would not come. For the first time in 20 years, he had no argument left to give. Elena Cruz picked up her data pad, nodded politely to the stunned chamber, and walked back to her seat. Behind her, on the massive display, the outer rim glowed a soft human blue, system after system, world after world. The council had banned humans from the outer rim. Now, in a way none of them had expected, humans owned it. Word of what happened in the council chamber spread across the galaxy within hours. On 100 different worlds, news channels struggled to explain what had taken place. Some reports called it a clever trick. Some called it an act of war fought without a single shot fired. Others simply admitted that they did not fully understand what had happened, only that the humans, who everyone believed had just been humiliated and thrown out of the rim, now somehow owned almost all of it. On Earth, the reaction was very different from the confusion spreading through the rest of the galaxy. President Ibe addressed the nation that evening, standing in front of a simple podium with no grand decorations behind him. He looked tired, but calm. 30 days ago, another government told us we did not belong in the outer rim, he said. They believed that because they had more votes, more ships, and more history, they could simply remove us from a place our people had spent 100 years building. They were wrong, not because we fought them, not because we broke their laws. We won because we understood their own laws better than they did, and we were patient enough to use that understanding wisely. Across human colonies, from the crowded cities of Earth to the small mining outposts on the edge of known space, people watched the broadcast with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Families who had packed up their homes and boarded evacuation ships only weeks earlier now found themselves receiving new messages, informing them that the very colonies they had left now belonged, officially and legally, to humanity itself. Many of them did not know whether to laugh or cry. Some did both. Back on Sarah Station, in a private meeting room far from the noise of the main chamber, Voth Kal sat alone with 2 other senior Tanari officials. His 4 eyes stared blankly at the table in front of him. "We must find a way to undo this," one official said. "There is no way to undo this," Voth Kal said quietly. "Not without breaking council law ourselves, and if we break the law to punish them, every species in this council will remember that their own property is no longer safe either." "Then what do we do?" Voth Kal did not answer right away. He thought of the human ambassador's calm voice, her steady eyes, the quiet confidence she had shown even as his own certainty had crumbled in front of the entire galaxy. He thought of how, for 20 years, He had believed humans were simply too young, too reckless, too new to be taken seriously as a galactic power. He realized now, sitting in that quiet room, that he had made a terrible mistake. He had judged humanity by how loudly they expanded, how quickly they built, how boldly they pushed into unclaimed space. He had never once considered how carefully, how patiently, and how intelligently they might respond when pushed back. "We do nothing for now," Vothkal finally said. "We watch, we learn. And we make sure this council, never again, underestimates what humanity is capable of doing, especially when we believe we have already won." Far away, in the newly human-owned systems of the Outer Rim, engineers and administrators from Earth began quietly arriving to take formal control of mining operations, trade stations, and colonial infrastructure that had, only a month before, belonged to a dozen different alien species. The transition was not simple. Many local workers, both human and alien, were uncertain what this sudden change of ownership would mean for their lives, their jobs, and their homes. But for the first time in 100 years, humanity did not merely live on the edge of the galaxy as guests who might be removed at any moment. They stood there as owners, protected by the very laws that had once been used to try and push them out. The Outer Rim ban had been meant to end humanity's place among the stars. Instead, it had marked the beginning of something far larger, something the rest of the galaxy was only just beginning to understand. 1 month after the vote at Sarah Station, the Outer Rim looked the same from space. The same red dwarf stars burned in the same quiet corners of the galaxy. The same mining stations turned slowly around the same asteroid belts. But underneath the surface, everything had changed. Tobias Reyes stood in a small office on Haven Station, the largest trade hub in the Rim, now flying the blue and white flag of Earth beside its old Rim Alliance markings. He looked out through the viewport at the busy docking bays below, filled with a mix of human cargo ships and alien vessels still finishing old contracts. "It is one thing to own something on paper," he said to the woman beside him, Dr. Amara Okonkwo, the newly appointed governor of Outer Rim territories. "It is another thing to actually run it." Dr. Okonkwo nodded. She had spent 15 years managing colonial infrastructure on Mars before being asked to take this job, and she already looked exhausted. "We have 300 stations, 40 mining guilds, and over 2 million non-human workers who did not choose to suddenly work for Earth. Half of them are afraid we will replace them. The other half are afraid we will exploit them the way some of the old Rim Alliance guild bosses did." "Then we do neither," Tobias said. "We keep the jobs, we honor the contracts. We prove slowly that owning something and ruling it with fear are not the same thing." It was not an easy task. Many alien workers across the Rim had grown up hearing that humans were reckless, aggressive, and impossible to trust. Rim Alliance news networks, still bitter over the loss of their territory, spread stories claiming that Earth planned to strip the Rim of its resources and abandon the workers once the profits were taken. Some of these stories were pure propaganda. Others carried just enough truth in them to cause real fear, because there were indeed some voices on Earth, mostly wealthy investors and impatient politicians, who wanted exactly that kind of quick, greedy exploitation. President Ibe understood this danger better than most. In a private meeting with his cabinet, he made his position clear. "If we treat the Rim only as property to be drained for profit, we will prove every one of Vothkal's warnings correct. We did not win this territory to become the very thing the Rim Alliance accused us of being. We must govern it better than they ever did, or this victory means nothing." To show this commitment, Earth's government made an unusual decision. Instead of replacing local administrators with human officials, they offered every existing Rim Alliance worker, from mining guild leaders to station engineers, the choice to keep their jobs under new contracts that guaranteed fair pay, safety standards, and long-term security. Many were suspicious at first. Slowly, as paychecks arrived on time and safety inspections actually happened, trust began to grow. One of the first workers to notice the difference was a Dorun mining supervisor named Bresk Talrun. Bresk had worked the asteroid fields near the Kessa system for over 30 years, first under Dorun guild management, and now under a new contract signed with Earth. For most of his life, safety equipment on the mining platforms had been old, poorly maintained, and often broken. Workers were expected to accept the risk as simply part of the job. 3 weeks after the new contracts began, an inspection team arrived at Bresk Station. He expected them to look for reasons to cut costs, the same as guild inspectors always had. Instead, they shut down 2 mining platforms immediately, citing dangerous equipment failures, and ordered full repairs before operations could continue. "You are losing money by stopping work," Bresk said to the human inspector, a young engineer named Sophia Marin, confused by what she was doing. "We are losing a little money today," Sophia said. "We would lose a lot more if one of your platforms explodes and kills 40 workers. Earth does not want dead miners. Earth wants safe miners who keep working for the next 50 years. Bresk said nothing at first, but he watched carefully over the following weeks as the repairs were completed, exactly as promised, and his platform reopened safer than it had ever been under Dorun Guild management. Slowly, word of stories like this began to spread across the Rim, worker to worker, station to station. Not every story was good. There were mistakes, misunderstandings, and moments where human administrators, still new to managing such a vast and diverse population, made serious errors. But overall, a strange and unexpected pattern began forming across the Outer Rim. Conditions for ordinary workers, human and alien alike, were slowly getting better. While this quiet transformation unfolded across the Rim's stations and mining fields, a very different kind of battle was taking place back on Sarah Station, inside the halls of the Galactic Council itself. Vothkal had not given up. He could not reverse the sale of the Outer Rim without breaking Council law, but he had spent the past month searching for another path, one that did not require breaking any rules at all. He found it in an old, mostly forgotten section of Council law called the Species Protection Act, originally written centuries earlier to prevent large, powerful species from exploiting smaller, weaker ones during colonial expansion. The Species Protection Act allows the Council to appoint an oversight committee over any territory where a dominant species controls the economic livelihood of multiple smaller species. Vothkal explained to a private gathering of Rim Alliance representatives. "If we can prove that humanity's ownership of the Rim threatens the well-being of the smaller species living there, we can force the Council to install an oversight committee, one with the power to review and potentially reverse any human decision regarding Rim territory. You want to use worker protection laws against the humans, even though workers are being treated better than before?" asked a Phaex representative, skeptical. "It does not matter what is actually happening," Vothkal said. "It matters what the Council believes is happening. We simply need enough testimony, enough evidence, real or exaggerated, to convince the Council that oversight is necessary. Once the committee is installed, we control the narrative from within." This plan required patience, something Vothkal had learned painfully that humans possessed in great supply. Over the following weeks, Rim Alliance agents began quietly traveling across the Outer Rim, searching for workers willing to speak against their new human administrators. Most workers, especially those whose lives had genuinely improved, refused to cooperate. But Vothkal's agents did not need everyone. They only needed a few convincing voices, and enough money could always find a few. They found one such voice in a struggling shipping company owner named Grazik Fen, a Khaleesi trader who had lost a lucrative contract when Earth's new administration replaced his old, poorly maintained cargo fleet requirement with stricter safety standards he could not afford to meet. Bitter and desperate for income, Grazik agreed to testify before the Council, claiming that Earth's new policies were designed to push smaller alien businesses out of the Rim entirely, favoring only large human corporations. It was not entirely true, but it was not entirely false either. Some smaller businesses genuinely had struggled to meet the new, higher standards Earth introduced, standards that larger companies, human and alien alike, could afford far more easily. Back on Earth, Tobias Reyes received word of the growing political threat from an unexpected source. Elena Cruz, still serving as Earth's chief ambassador to the Galactic Council. "They are building a case," she told him during a secure video call, her face serious. "Voth Kal has found enough testimony to bring a formal review before the Council next month. If they succeed, an oversight committee will be installed, and every decision we make in the Rim will need approval from a council board that includes species who still want us gone." "Can we stop it?" Tobias asked. "Not by hiding the truth," Elena said. "If we try to silence critics or bury the real problems some smaller businesses are facing, we will only prove Voth Kal's argument correct. Our only path is to fix the actual problems fast enough, and openly enough, that when the review happens, the evidence favors us instead of them." This was easier said than done. Tobias spent the following weeks working with Dr. Okonkwo and a team of economic advisors, studying every complaint that had come from smaller Rim Alliance businesses since the transition began. Some complaints were exaggerated, driven mostly by resentment over losing old, unfair advantages, but others were genuine. Small trading companies, family-run mining operations, and independent shipping businesses across the Rim were struggling to compete under new regulations designed mainly with large operations in mind. "We built rules to fix the biggest problems fast," Dr. Okonkwo admitted during a late-night strategy meeting. "But we did not think carefully enough about the smaller players caught in between." "Then we fix that," Tobias said. "We create a support program specifically for small independent businesses, human and alien alike, offering low-interest loans and extended timelines to meet safety standards. We make sure every species in the Rim, not just the big guilds, sees real benefit from Earth's ownership." The program was announced 3 weeks before Voth Kal's scheduled review, and it spread through the Rim quickly, though not fast enough to fix every problem instantly. Still, it was enough to shift the tone of many workers and business owners who had been undecided. Grazik Fen himself, the bitter Khaleesi trader recruited by Voth Kal's agents, received an offer under the new program: a low-interest loan to upgrade his aging cargo fleet, along with an extended 2-year timeline to meet the new safety standards. He sat with the offer for 3 days before finally accepting it, quietly withdrawing his agreement to testify before the council. He did not tell Voth Kal's agents why. He simply stopped answering their messages. When the day of the council review finally arrived, Voth Kal stood once again at the podium of the council chamber, but this time his case felt weaker than he had hoped. Half of his witnesses had withdrawn, citing new improvements in their business conditions. The testimony that remained was thin, filled with complaints that Earth's own representatives were able to answer point by point, showing evidence of genuine, ongoing efforts to fix every problem raised. By the end of the session, the Council voted against installing an oversight committee, deciding instead that Earth's Rim administration, while imperfect, was making good faith efforts to address concerns raised by smaller species. It was not a total defeat for Voth Kal. It was not a total victory for Earth either. But it was, once again, a moment where humanity's careful, patient response had turned a serious political threat into something far less dangerous than it could have been. Voth Kal watched Elena Cruz leave the chamber that day with a strange mixture of frustration and reluctant respect. He was beginning to understand something important about humanity, something the rest of the galaxy was only slowly starting to realize as well. Humans did not simply react to threats. They learned from them, adapted faster than expected, and turned even their own mistakes into opportunities to grow stronger. It was, he thought grimly, a very dangerous trait for a species so young to already possess. While the political battle played out on Sarah Station, life on the Rim itself continued to shift in smaller, quieter ways. On the mining station near Kessa, Bresk Talrun had been promoted to lead supervisor over 3 platforms instead of 1, a reward for his decades of experience and his willingness to work closely with the new human safety inspectors. He found himself, somewhat to his own surprise, defending the new administration to other Dorun workers who remained suspicious. They fixed the platforms, he told a group of younger miners during a meal break. They did not just promise to fix them, they actually did it. When was the last time the guild bosses did that? Maybe they only fixed it because they want good numbers to show the council, one young miner argued. Maybe once they have what they want, they will stop caring. Brusk considered this. It was a fair concern, one he had shared himself only weeks earlier. Maybe, he admitted, but my equipment is still safe today, whatever their reasons were. I will judge them by what they keep doing, not by what I imagine they might do someday. This kind of quiet, practical thinking spread slowly across the rim, station by station, worker by worker. Not everyone was convinced. Some communities remained deeply distrustful of Earth's sudden ownership, especially among species who had lost old positions of power and profit when the Rim Alliance guilds lost control. Resentment simmered in certain corners, waiting for a spark. That spark nearly came from an unexpected direction, Earth itself. Back on Earth, not every human leader agreed with President Ibe's careful, patient approach to governing the Rim. A growing faction within the Earth Economic Council, led by a wealthy industrialist named Aldrich Voss, argued that Earth was being too generous, too slow, too cautious with territory that had been won fairly, and should now be used to maximize profit for human companies as quickly as possible. We spent enormous resources buying that debt and those licenses, Voss argued during a heated economic council session. Every credit we spend fixing safety standards for alien workers or offering loans to alien businesses is a credit not spent building wealth for our own people. We won the Rim. We should benefit from it, not spend years babysitting the very species who spent 100 years trying to keep us out. Tobias Reyes, present at the session as an advisor, pushed back firmly. The species living in the Rim did not choose to suddenly work for Earth. Many of them are afraid, and rightly so, given what some of our own investors clearly want to do. If we abandon fair treatment now, we will lose everything we worked for over these past months, and we will prove every accusation the Rim Alliance made against us. Sentiment does not build economies, Voss said coldly. Trust does, Tobias replied. A frightened, resentful workforce sabotages, strikes, and revolts eventually. A workforce that trusts its leadership builds wealth for generations. I have seen both kinds of systems fail and succeed across human history. I know which one we are trying to build here. The debate grew heated enough that President Ibe himself was forced to intervene personally, ultimately siding firmly with Tobias and Dr. Okonkwo's approach, though not without cost. Aldrich Voss and several allied investors quietly withdrew significant funding from official Rim development projects, redirecting their wealth toward private ventures instead, ventures that operated with far less oversight and far less concern for the well-being of alien workers. This created a new, quieter danger. While official Earth policy in the Rim remained focused on fairness and cooperation, a growing number of private human companies, funded by investors like Voss, began operating in the shadows of the Rim's legal system, offering workers lower pay, worse safety conditions, and fewer protections than the official Earth administration provided. These companies were technically still following the letter of the law, but only barely, exploiting gaps and loopholes that Dr. Okonkwo's team had not yet had time to close. It was Sophia Marin, the young safety inspector who had first shut down Bresk Talrun's dangerous mining platforms, who first noticed the pattern. During a routine inspection tour of a smaller, less monitored sector of the Rim, she discovered a privately owned shipping company operating with equipment even older and more dangerous than anything she had seen under the previous Rim Alliance guild system. "This is worse than what we replaced," she reported back to Dr. Okonkwo, showing images of exposed wiring, unsafe cargo bays, and workers, both human and alien, laboring in clearly dangerous conditions. And it is happening under our own flag. Dr. Okonkwo's expression darkened as she reviewed the report. Find out who owns this company. The investigation led back, through several layers of shell corporations, to Aldrich Voss himself. When Dr. Okonkwo brought this evidence directly to President Ibe, His reaction was immediate and severe. "Shut it down," he ordered. "Every unsafe operation, regardless of who owns it. I do not care how much money or political influence stands behind it. We did not fight to win the Rim honestly only to lose it through our own greed." Voss was furious when Earth's government moved to seize and shut down his unsafe operations, publicly accusing President Ibe of punishing successful businessmen out of political jealousy. Privately, however, he understood the deeper danger his actions had created. If word of his exploitative practices reached the Galactic Council, before Earth's government could clean up the situation themselves, it would hand Voth Kal exactly the kind of real, undeniable evidence he had been searching for. Fortunately for Earth, Dr. Okonkwo's team acted quickly and quietly, shutting down every unsafe private operation within days, offering affected workers immediate transfer to properly regulated companies, and issuing formal compensation for the harm already caused. By the time rumors of the scandal reached Rim Alliance ears, Earth had already resolved the problem internally, turning what could have been a devastating political weapon into a demonstration of exactly the kind of accountability the Rim Alliance itself had rarely shown during its own long history of governing the region. Bresk Talrun heard about the scandal weeks later, discussed quietly among workers across the Rim's communication networks. "See," one of his younger colleagues said, "I told you they only care about their image." "Maybe," Bresk said again, though this time with less certainty than before. "But they still shut it down. They still fixed it fast before we even fully understood what was happening. I do not know if that makes them good exactly. But it makes them better than what came before." It was not a ringing endorsement. It was not blind loyalty. It was something quieter and in many ways something far more valuable. A slow, growing trust built not on promises but on results, tested again and again under real pressure. Across the wider galaxy, species who had once dismissed humanity as reckless and unpredictable were beginning to notice something else entirely. Humans made mistakes, plenty of them. But unlike so many older, more established powers, they seemed willing to admit those mistakes quickly, correct them decisively, and keep moving forward. Voth Kal, watching these events unfold from Sarah Station, understood better than most just how dangerous that pattern truly was. An empire that never made mistakes would eventually grow arrogant and blind. An empire that learned quickly from every mistake it made would only grow stronger, faster, and harder to stop with each passing year. The Outer Rim now belonged to Earth, at least on paper. But the greater question, one that would shape the coming years far more than any single vote or purchase, was what kind of galactic power humanity would choose to become now that it finally held real territory, real influence, and real responsibility among the stars. 6 months after the purchase of the Outer Rim, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new normal. Human ships moved openly through territory that had once banned them entirely. Human flags flew beside old Rim Alliance marking on hundreds of stations. Trade between Earth and the wider galaxy had grown faster than anyone predicted, and many species who had never even met a human before now worked alongside them daily. Not everyone accepted this new reality peacefully. On a remote mining outpost near the edge of the Rim, a small group of Dorun militants gathered inside an abandoned storage bay, far from any official surveillance. Their leader, a former guild enforcer named Karnak Dresh, had lost his position of authority when Earth's administration replaced the old Dorun guild management structure with new safety and labor standards. He had spent the past 6 months growing more bitter, more angry, and more convinced that violence, not patience, was the only answer left. "They took everything," Karnak said to the dozen armed figures gathered around him. "Our authority, our profits, our way of life. They smile, they pay fair wages, and they think this makes everything acceptable. It does not. This was our territory long before any human ship arrived here." "What do you propose?" asked one of his followers, a younger Dorun named Fesic. "We remind them that owning something on paper is not the same as controlling it in truth," Karnak said. "We strike at their infrastructure, their supply lines, their confidence. We make the cost of holding this territory higher than they are willing to pay. Over the following weeks, a series of small but troubling incidents began occurring across scattered parts of the outer rim. A fuel depot near the Kessa system exploded under suspicious circumstances, destroying valuable equipment and injuring several workers. A cargo convoy carrying critical mining supplies was ambushed and stripped of its equipment before disappearing into unclaimed space. Communication relays near 3 separate stations went dark simultaneously, cutting off entire sectors from contact with Earth's central administration for nearly 2 full days. At first, these incidents were treated as isolated accidents or ordinary criminal activity, common enough in any large, newly governed territory. But Sophia Marin, now working closely with Earth's newly formed Rim Security Division, began noticing patterns that suggested something more organized. "These are not random," she reported during a briefing with Dr. Okonkwo and Admiral Chen, who had been reassigned from Earth's main fleet to oversee Rim defense operations. "The targets are too specific: fuel depots, supply convoys, communication relays. Someone is deliberately trying to disrupt our ability to operate, not simply steal resources." Admiral Chen studied the incident reports carefully. "This has the feel of a coordinated resistance movement, not simple criminal activity. Likely former guild enforcers or military personnel who lost their positions when we took over administration." "Can we track them?" Dr. Okonkwo asked. "We can try," Admiral Chen said. "But the Rim is vast, and we do not yet have the same deep knowledge of its hidden corners that groups like this clearly possess. This will take time." While Earth's security forces worked to track down the source of the growing unrest, a far more dangerous threat was quietly forming back on Sarah Station. Voth Kal, still searching for any legal path to weaken Earth's hold on the Rim, had begun secret discussions with several Rim Alliance military commanders, exploring a much bolder option than legal maneuvering. "The Council will not act against Earth through law," Voth Kal admitted during a private meeting with General Tharsisvel, commander of the Dorun Home Fleet, one of the largest military forces still loyal to the old Rim Alliance order. "Their legal position is too strong, and too many species now benefit from trade with Earth to support further Council action against them." "Then perhaps law is not the correct approach," General Vell said. "If humanity's grip on the Rim weakens through unrest and instability, if their new territory becomes more costly to hold than it is worth, they may choose to withdraw on their own, without any need for the Council to act at all." "You are suggesting we allow this violence to continue unchecked," Voth Kal said carefully. "I am suggesting we allow nature to take its course," General Vell replied. "The humans did not earn the Rim through blood or sacrifice. They earned it through clever paperwork. Perhaps it is time they learned that holding territory requires more than clever paperwork alone." Voth Kal hesitated. Despite his long opposition to humanity's presence in the Rim, he had built his career on legal and political maneuvering, not violence. But as weeks passed and Earth's grip on the Rim showed no sign of weakening through legitimate means, his patience, like Karnak Dresches before him, began wearing thin. "I will not openly support this," Voth Kal finally said, "but I will not actively work against it either. Let us see how humanity responds to a threat that cannot be solved through economics or careful diplomacy alone." With this quiet, unofficial support, Karnak Dresch's small resistance movement began receiving better equipment, better intelligence, and more experienced fighters, all funneled quietly through channels connected to sympathetic Rim Alliance military officers. What had begun as a handful of angry, displaced workers slowly grew into a genuine organized militia, capable of far more dangerous operations than simple sabotage. The turning point came 3 weeks later, when Karnak's forces launched a coordinated attack against Haven Station itself, the largest and most important trade hub in the entire Outer Rim. Using stolen mining explosives and detailed knowledge of the station's internal structure, gained from former guild workers still bitter over their lost positions, the militants managed to breach an outer docking section, taking nearly 200 hostages, both human and alien workers caught in the chaos. Word of the attack reached Earth within minutes, sending shockwaves through the government. President Ibe called an emergency session of his full cabinet, joined remotely by Admiral Chen and Dr. Okonkwo from the Rim itself. "How many hostages?" President Ibe asked, his voice tight with controlled tension. 187 confirmed, sir, Admiral Chen reported. 63 human, 124 alien workers from various species. The attackers have demanded full Earth withdrawal from the Outer Rim within 72 hours, or they will begin executing hostages. The room fell silent. This was the moment many had feared since the beginning, the moment when careful diplomacy and clever economics would no longer be enough to protect what humanity had built. "Military options?" President Ibe asked. Admiral Chen's expression was grim. "We could attempt a direct assault, but Haven Station's internal structure is complex, and the attackers clearly have detailed knowledge of its layout. Any direct assault risks significant hostage casualties. I do not recommend it as our first option." "Then what do you recommend?" "Time," Admiral Chen said. "Every hour we negotiate is an hour we spend gathering intelligence, positioning forces, and searching for a solution that does not require storming the station outright. I recommend we open communication with the attackers immediately, buy as much time as possible, and prepare a careful, precise operation rather than a rushed one." President Ibe nodded slowly. "Do it, but understand this. I will not simply wait and hope this resolves itself. I want every possible resource directed toward ending this safely and quickly." Negotiations began within hours, conducted personally by Dr. Okonkwo, whose years of experience managing difficult colonial relationships made her uniquely suited to the delicate task. Karnak Dresh, speaking through the station's compromised communication systems, made his position clear from the start. "We do not wish to harm these hostages," he said, his voice carrying real conviction despite the violence of his actions. "But we will, if that is what it takes to make Earth understand that this territory was never truly yours to take, no matter what paperwork you signed." "The hostages you hold include your own people," Dr. Okonkwo replied carefully. "Dorun workers, Phaex administrators, Renu engineers, alongside our human staff. If you harm them, you will not be striking a blow against Earth alone. You will be striking a blow against every species who has come to depend on the station for their livelihood." "Better a difficult truth than a comfortable lie," Karnak replied. "The old ways were not perfect, but at least they were ours. I would rather this territory return to hardship under Rim Alliance control than remain comfortable under human ownership." As negotiations continued, buying precious time, Admiral Chen's forces worked urgently behind the scenes. Sophia Marin, drawing on her months of experience inspecting Haven Station's infrastructure, provided detailed technical knowledge of the station's internal systems. Knowledge that proved crucial in identifying a small, rarely used maintenance corridor that bypassed the section currently controlled by Karnak's militants. "If we can get a small team through this corridor undetected," Admiral Chen explained to her strike team, gathered aboard a support vessel positioned quietly outside the station, "we can reach the hostage-holding area directly, without alerting the main group of attackers stationed near the primary docking entrance." The operation carried enormous risk. A single misstep, a single alarm triggered too early, could result in exactly the kind of hostage tragedy everyone was desperately trying to avoid. But as the 72-hour deadline approached with no sign of resolution through negotiation alone, Admiral Chen made the difficult decision to proceed. Under cover of continued negotiations, designed specifically to keep Karnak Dresh's attention focused on communication rather than security, a small strike team of 12 elite Earth soldiers moved quietly through Haven Station's forgotten maintenance corridors. Guided in real time by Sophia Marin's technical knowledge, relayed directly to their communication systems. The operation unfolded with careful, practiced precision. Within minutes, the strike team reached the hostage-holding area, neutralizing the small guard detail stationed there before Karnak's main force even realized what was happening. As the primary assault began at the main docking entrance, drawing the militants' attention and forces away from the hostages, the strike team moved quickly to secure and evacuate every captive to safety. Karnak Dresh, realizing too late that his hostages had already been freed, found himself and his remaining forces surrounded, their leverage gone, their position hopeless. Faced with certain defeat, most of the militants surrendered without further violence. Karnak himself was taken into custody. His rebellion ended after barely 72 hours, though the scars it left behind, both physical and political, would last far longer. In the aftermath, as Haven Station slowly returned to normal operations, President Ibe addressed the galaxy directly for the first time since the crisis began. His broadcast carried across every major news network, human and alien alike. "What happened at Haven Station was a tragedy that should never have occurred," he said. "It happened because some believed that violence could accomplish what honest negotiation could not. I want to be clear. Earth did not seize the outer rim through violence, and we will not be forced to hold it through violence either. But let no one mistake our patience for weakness. We will protect the people, human and alien alike, who now call this territory home." Across the rim, word of the successful hostage rescue spread quickly, and reactions were mixed but leaned strongly in Earth's favor. Many species who had remained neutral or skeptical of human ownership found themselves impressed by the careful, precise way the crisis had been resolved. Avoiding the kind of heavy-handed military response many had feared from a species still relatively new to real galactic power. Back on Sarah Station, Voth Kal watched the crisis unfold with a growing sense of unease. He had not directly ordered the attack, but his quiet, unofficial support for General Vell's plan made him deeply complicit in what had nearly become a devastating tragedy. As reports confirmed that Earth had resolved the crisis without significant loss of life, without resorting to the brutal military crackdown many had expected, Voth Kal understood with growing certainty that his strategy had failed completely. Worse, it had backfired. Rather than proving humanity unfit to hold the rim, the crisis had demonstrated exactly the opposite, that Earth possessed both the careful patience to negotiate and the precise capability to act decisively when negotiation reached its limits. Species across the galaxy who had once dismissed humanity as reckless upstarts now saw something far more concerning to those still opposed to their rise. They saw a species learning, quickly and effectively, exactly what it meant to hold real power responsibly. General Vell, facing intense scrutiny once Council investigators began examining the source of the militants' unusually advanced equipment, quietly resigned his command, his connection to the attack never fully proven but strongly suspected by those who mattered most. Voth Kal himself avoided direct consequences, his careful political instincts protecting him from formal accusation, but his influence within the Council had weakened considerably. Humanity's hold on the outer rim, tested by economics, by politics, and now by violence itself, had not merely survived. It had grown stronger with each challenge, each crisis revealing new strengths that the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to fully understand. In the weeks following the Haven Station crisis, Dr. Okonkwo insisted on something unusual, something that surprised even her own staff. Rather than simply punishing Karnak Dresh and his captured followers as harshly as possible, she requested a formal, open hearing held on Haven Station itself, where the militants would face judgment not only under Earth's laws, but in front of the very community they had endangered. "Why give him a public stage at all?" Sophia Marin asked, still recovering from the exhaustion of the crisis. "Why not simply process him quietly and move on?" "Because hiding him away lets people imagine whatever they want about why this happened," Dr. Okonkwo said. "Some will imagine we are covering up mistreatment. Others will imagine we are covering up weakness. If we show, openly, exactly what happened and exactly why, we take that story away from Voth Kal and anyone else who might try to twist it into something it was not." The hearing was held 3 weeks later, broadcast openly across Rim communication networks for anyone who wished to watch. Karnak Dresh stood before a small panel of judges, human and alien both, drawn from the communities most affected by his actions. He did not deny what he had done. "I do not regret opposing Earth's ownership of this territory," he said, his voice steady despite his circumstances. "I regret the harm caused to the hostages, including my own people, who did not deserve to be caught in this conflict. That much I will accept responsibility for." Bresk Talrun, invited among a group of Rim workers to observe the proceedings, listened carefully to every word. He did not feel sympathy for Karnak exactly, but he understood, in a way many humans watching from Earth perhaps could not, the deep frustration that had driven a proud, experienced worker to such desperate action. "He is not entirely wrong about how it felt," Bresk admitted quietly to Fesic, Karnak's former follower, who had surrendered peacefully during the crisis and now sat nearby awaiting his own hearing. "Losing control over your own life, watching strangers decide your future. That fear was real, even if what he did with that fear was wrong." "Then why do you support them now?" Fesic asked, genuinely curious rather than accusing. Bresk considered the question carefully before answering. "Because fear alone builds nothing. It only destroys. I watched Earth make mistakes, plenty of them, and I watched them fix those mistakes faster than any guild boss I served for 30 years ever did. That is not the same as trusting them completely. But it is enough to work with them, rather than against them, while I watch to see what they become next." The panel ultimately sentenced Karnak Dresh to a lengthy period of supervised labor within Rim infrastructure projects. Rather than the harsher punishment many had expected, a decision Dr. Okonkwo had quietly recommended, believing that a visible path toward redemption would do more to heal the Rim's fractured trust than a purely punitive sentence ever could. Fesic and several younger militants received far lighter sentences, given their willingness to surrender peacefully and cooperate fully with the investigation that followed. News of the fair, transparent hearing spread across the galaxy, nearly as widely as news of the crisis itself had. Many species watching from outside the Rim, species who had never fully trusted either the old Rim Alliance guild system or humanity's sudden rise to power, found themselves quietly reconsidering old assumptions. A species capable of building clever economic strategies, diffusing hostage crises with precision, and then handling the aftermath with genuine fairness rather than simple revenge, was not the reckless, dangerous newcomer many had feared. Back on Sarah Station, even Voth Kal found himself, in private moments, unable to deny the pattern forming clearly before him. Humanity's path through the Outer Rim had been anything but smooth. They had made enemies, made mistakes, and faced real danger at nearly every turn. Yet each time they emerged not merely intact, but somehow wiser, more capable, and more trusted than before. He began to wonder, quietly and uncomfortably, whether the true danger humanity posed to the old order of the galaxy was never their aggression or ambition at all, but something far harder to fight against. Their stubborn, patient willingness to learn, adapt, and improve, no matter how difficult the lesson or how painful the mistake that taught it to them. It was a question that would only grow more urgent as humanity's influence in the Rim continued to expand, drawing the attention of powers far greater and far more dangerous than a single bitter guild enforcer or a single frustrated ambassador ever could be alone. 1 year after the purchase of the Outer Rim, humanity's position among the stars had changed more than anyone, human or alien, could have predicted. Earth was no longer seen as a young, reckless species pushing at the edges of galactic society. It had become a genuine power, controlling one of the most valuable and strategically important regions in known space. Trade flowed through Rim stations in greater volume than ever before. Colonies that had once feared eviction now thrived under stable, transparent administration. Even skeptics like Bresk Talrun had settled into a cautious, working trust with their human employers. This rise did not go unnoticed by powers far beyond the Rim Alliance's old borders. Deep in the galactic core, in territory so old and so heavily defended that few outside its borders ever saw it directly, existed the Threkan Dominion, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. The Threkan rarely involved themselves in the affairs of younger species, preferring instead to observe quietly from a distance, intervening only when their own interests were directly threatened. For most of the past century, humanity had existed far below their notice, a minor curiosity among countless younger species scattered across the galaxy's edges. The purchase of the Outer Rim changed that. High Magistrate Solen Thray, senior representative of the Threkan Dominion, called a rare private session with her closest advisors aboard the Dominion's flagship, a vessel larger than many entire space stations, hidden within a heavily guarded system far from common trade routes. The humans now control nearly the entire Outer Rim, she said, her voice calm but carrying clear weight among her advisors. This was territory we always assumed would remain fragmented, contested among smaller powers, never unified enough to threaten our own long-term interests along that border. Humanity has changed that balance, whether they intended to or not. Should we be concerned? Asked Advisor Kellen Voss, one of her senior military strategists. Humanity remains vastly weaker than the Dominion in raw military strength. Their fleet, while growing, could not challenge us directly for generations. Military strength is not my concern, High Magistrate Thray said. It is their pattern of behavior that concerns me. Every challenge thrown against them, economic, political, even violent, has only strengthened their position rather than weakening it. This is not the pattern of a species that will remain a minor power much longer. She paused, considering her next words carefully. I propose we test them directly, ourselves, rather than relying on second-hand reports from Rim Alliance sources, who clearly failed to properly assess this threat before it grew this large. The test came 3 months later, in a form far more subtle than open military confrontation. The Threkan Dominion held ancient, technically valid claims to several mining systems along the deepest edge of the Outer Rim, claims dating back centuries, long predating the Rim Alliance's own presence in the region. These claims had gone unused and largely forgotten for generations, considered by most Rim Alliance species to be essentially abandoned. When Earth's economic teams had purchased Rim territory, they had, in good faith, included these seemingly abandoned systems as part of the broader package. Now, the Threkan Dominion formally activated their ancient claims, demanding immediate return of 4 mining systems, along with substantial compensation for what they termed a century of unauthorized resource extraction conducted by Rim Alliance species, operating on Dominion territory without permission. The demand landed on Earth's government like a thunderclap. Unlike the Rim Alliance, whose military strength Earth's advisors understood well, the Threkan Dominion represented a power of an entirely different scale, one that few in Earth's government had seriously prepared to negotiate against. This is not a request, Admiral Chen explained grimly during an emergency cabinet session. This is a test. They want to see how we respond when faced with a power far greater than ourselves. If we simply surrender the territory out of fear, they will conclude we are not serious players in this region. If we refuse outright, we risk a conflict Earth cannot possibly win. And if we negotiate, President Ibe asked, then we show them exactly what we showed the Rim Alliance, Tobias Reyes said, having been called back into direct advisory service the moment the Dominion's demands became known. That we understand law, economics, and patience better than most expect from a species our age. This is not a battle to be won with fleets. It is a battle to be won with careful, precise diplomacy. Alina Cruz, still serving as Earth's senior ambassador, was dispatched immediately to open direct negotiations with High Magistrate Thray, an assignment far beyond anything she had previously handled. The stakes here were not simply territorial. A poor outcome risked drawing the attention of a civilization capable of erasing Earth's entire fleet without meaningful resistance. Their first meeting took place aboard a neutral diplomatic station positioned carefully between Dominion and Rim territory. High Magistrate Threy appeared exactly as her reputation suggested, calm, unreadable, and utterly confident in her position. "Ambassador Cruz," she said, "your species has shown remarkable skill navigating the politics of younger, less experienced civilizations. I am curious to see whether that skill extends to negotiations with powers who have existed since before your species learned to walk upright." "Every negotiation begins with understanding what each side truly wants," Alina replied, refusing to be intimidated by the deliberate provocation. "Your claim to these four systems is legally valid under ancient Dominion law, yes, but it has gone unenforced for centuries, during which multiple Rim Alliance species developed significant infrastructure across those systems in good faith, believing the territory abandoned. Simple seizure ignores considerable investment made by parties who acted honestly, without any intention of violating Dominion rights." "Then what do you propose?" High Magistrate Threy asked, her tone giving away nothing. "Partnership rather than a seizure," Alina said. "Formal recognition of Dominion ownership over the underlying mineral rights to these four systems, combined with a long-term operating agreement allowing Earth to continue managing existing infrastructure, with substantial royalty payments flowing directly to the Dominion treasury. You gain guaranteed, steady income from territory that has produced nothing for centuries, without the cost and complexity of managing distant infrastructure yourselves. We retain the stability our workers and business partners across the Rim depend upon." High Magistrate Threy studied Alina carefully for a long moment. "You are suggesting the Dominion accept steady income instead of full territorial control, based purely on economic logic rather than the principle of rightful ownership." "I am suggesting the Dominion consider which outcome truly serves its long-term interests," Alina said. "Territorial pride satisfies a moment. Steady, guaranteed income across centuries builds lasting wealth. I suspect a civilization as old as yours understands the difference better than most." It was a bold argument, one that risked deeply offending a proud ancient power. But High Magistrate Threy, rather than reacting with anger, allowed herself something Alina had not expected: a slow, measured nod of genuine consideration. "Your species," she said finally, "does not argue like the younger civilizations we typically encounter along our borders. You argue like a power that has already learned patience is worth more than pride. That is a rare quality among species so young." Negotiations continued over the following weeks, difficult and detailed, covering every aspect of the proposed arrangement down to precise royalty percentages and long-term dispute resolution procedures. Tobias Reyes worked closely alongside Alina throughout the process, providing detailed economic modeling that demonstrated, with careful precision, exactly how much steady value the Dominion stood to gain from cooperation rather than confrontation. Not every voice within the Dominion supported this approach. Advisor Kellen Voss, still deeply suspicious of humanity's rapid rise, argued strongly for a harder line. "We should demand full return of the territory, backed by clear military presence if necessary," he insisted during internal Dominion deliberations. Showing this much flexibility toward a species, this young sets a troubling precedent for how easily our ancient claims might be negotiated away by clever newcomers in the future. Or it demonstrates exactly the kind of wisdom that has kept the Dominion secure and prosperous for millennia, High Magistrate Threy countered. "We do not maintain our position through constant conflict with every rising power we encounter. We maintain it by recognizing genuine value when it is offered, and by ensuring those who deal honestly with us find that honesty rewarded rather than punished." After nearly 2 months of careful, detailed negotiation, a formal agreement was finally reached, establishing exactly the kind of partnership Alina had originally proposed. The Dominion retained formal, ancient ownership over the underlying mineral rights, receiving substantial guaranteed royalties from ongoing Rim operations. Earth retained operational control over the infrastructure its people and Rim Alliance partners had built, preserving the stability so many communities across the region depended upon. When news of the agreement reached the wider galaxy, reactions varied widely. Many Rim Alliance species, still bitter over losing their own former claims to Earth, watched with something close to disbelief as humanity successfully negotiated directly with the ancient Threkan Dominion, a power most Rim Alliance species had never dared approach directly in their entire history. Voth Kal, receiving the news aboard Sarah Station, found himself once again forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Humanity had faced a power vastly beyond their own strength, a power capable of ending their claim to the Outer Rim with barely any effort at all, and had not merely survived the encounter. They had emerged from it with a formal partnership, expanded legitimacy, and the quiet, grudging respect of one of the oldest civilizations in known space. "They keep doing this," he admitted to a small gathering of remaining Rim Alliance loyalists, his voice carrying an exhaustion that had grown steadily over the past year. "Every threat we send against them, every crisis, every test, they absorb it, learn from it, and emerge stronger than before. I do not know how much longer we can continue treating them as a problem to be solved, rather than a power to be accepted." "Then what do you suggest?" one loyalist asked. Voth Kal considered the question for a long moment before answering, his four eyes staring at nothing in particular, lost in thought. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it is time we stopped asking how to remove humanity from the Outer Rim and started asking how our own species might learn to survive, and even thrive, alongside them instead." It was not the answer his followers wanted to hear. But as reports continued arriving, detailing humanity's growing partnerships, growing trade networks, and growing respect across an increasingly wide range of galactic powers, even Voth Kal's staunchest supporters found it harder and harder to argue against his quiet, reluctant conclusion. The Outer Rim, once a territory humanity had been forcibly banned from entering, had become something far greater than anyone, human or alien, could have imagined only a year earlier. The foundation of humanity's first true recognition as a genuine, respected power among the stars. Back on Earth, the news of the Dominion Agreement sparked celebration in some circles and deep unease in others. Aldrich Voss, still bitter over the shutdown of his exploitative Rim operations months earlier, seized on the moment to argue that Earth's government had given away too much simply to avoid confrontation. "We handed over guaranteed profits for generations, all because we were too afraid to stand firm," he argued publicly, hoping to rally support among investors still frustrated by the government's cautious approach to Rim development. A stronger, bolder leadership would have found a way to keep full control of those four systems without paying tribute to anyone. Tobias Reyes, asked to respond during a public interview, remained calm and measured, as he so often did. Mr. Voss believes strength means refusing to share anything with anyone. "I believe strength means understanding exactly what you can gain by sharing wisely, and exactly what you would lose by refusing out of pride alone. The Dominion could have erased our claim entirely, without negotiation, without warning, and without any consequence to themselves. Instead, we now have a formal, respected partnership with one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. I do not consider that a weakness. I consider it one of the greatest achievements in our short history among the stars." Public opinion, watching the tangible results unfold across the following months, largely sided with Tobias and the government's approach. Royalty payments to the Dominion proved manageable, easily offset by the continued growth of trade and stability across the Rim. More importantly, the formal recognition from such an ancient, respected power opened new diplomatic doors that had previously remained closed to humanity entirely. Smaller civilizations near Dominion territory, who had always taken careful note of which younger species earned Dominion respect, began reaching out to Earth directly, seeking their own trade agreements and diplomatic relationships. On Haven Station, life continued in its slow, steady rhythm, shaped by the changes of the past year, but no longer defined solely by fear or uncertainty. Sophia Marin, now serving as a senior safety coordinator overseeing inspection standards across the entire Rim, found herself reflecting on how much had changed since her first tense encounter with Bresk Talrun's dangerous mining platform. "You look tired," Bresk said one afternoon, finding her reviewing reports in the station's central observation lounge, a wide window looking out over the busy docking bays below. "Good tired," Sophia said, allowing herself a small smile. "We just finished certifying every mining platform across 6 systems under the new Unified Safety Code. No major violations found anywhere. A year ago, I would not have believed that possible." Bresk settled into the seat across from her, watching the ships moving steadily below. "A year ago, I would not have believed I would be sitting here, discussing safety codes with a human inspector, feeling something close to genuine respect for the people who once threatened to take everything I knew away from me." "Do you regret how things turned out?" Sophia asked, genuinely curious. Bresk considered the question carefully, as he always did. "I regret how much fear and anger it took to get here. Karnak was not entirely wrong to be afraid of losing everything familiar, but I do not regret where we have arrived, even if the path here was harder than it needed to be." He paused, glancing toward the distant stars beyond the viewport. "Perhaps that is simply the nature of real change. It rarely arrives gently, no matter how good the outcome eventually becomes." Elsewhere across the rim, similar quiet transformations continued unfolding, station by station, community by community. The old fear that had once defined relations between humanity and the wider galaxy had not vanished entirely, but it had softened considerably, replaced increasingly by a cautious, growing respect built on a full year of tested results rather than empty promises. Even within the Galactic Council itself, the political landscape had shifted noticeably. Species who had once eagerly supported Voth Kal's original ban now found themselves quietly seeking closer ties with Earth, eager to secure favorable trade agreements before their competitors did the same. The very fear that had once driven the Council to ban humanity from the Outer Rim entirely had, through a long and difficult year of challenges met and overcome, transformed gradually into something closer to respect, and in some cases, genuine partnership. Voth Kal, watching this transformation unfold from his office aboard Sarah Station, found himself facing a political reality he had spent 20 years trying to prevent. Humanity was no longer merely tolerated within galactic society. They were becoming essential to it, woven into trade networks, diplomatic relationships, and economic partnerships that stretched from the edges of the Outer Rim all the way to the ancient heart of Dominion territory itself. He did not know yet what this meant for the long-term future of his own people, or for the old order of alliances and rivalries that had shaped galactic politics for centuries before humanity's arrival. But he understood, with growing clarity, that the galaxy he had spent his career defending no longer existed in quite the same form it once had. Something new was rising among the stars, patient, adaptable, and stubbornly resilient in ways few species before it had ever managed to be. Whether that rise would ultimately prove beneficial or dangerous to the wider galaxy remained an open question, one that would only be answered fully with the passage of many more years. But for now, as ships bearing the blue and white flag of Earth moved steadily through territory that had once banned them entirely, one truth had become undeniable to every species watching closely enough to see it clearly. Humanity had arrived among the stars to stay, and the galaxy, whether ready or not, would have to learn to make room for them. 2 years after the vote that was meant to end humanity's presence in the Outer Rim forever, the Galactic Council called a new session, this time not to discuss removing humans from galactic society, but to formally discuss admitting Earth as a permanent seated member of the Council itself, with full voting rights equal to any other founding species. The chamber on Sarah Station was as crowded as it had been on that first fateful day, perhaps even more so. Delegates from over 60 species now filled the seats, many representing civilizations that had only recently established formal contact with the wider galaxy, drawn closer by the growing web of trade routes and diplomatic relationships that now stretched outward from the Outer Rim in every direction. Elena Cruz stood at the podium, older now, her gray hair a little grayer, but her eyes carrying the same steady calm they had held 2 years earlier, when she first announced Earth's ownership of the rim to a stunned and disbelieving chamber. 2 years ago, she began, this council voted to ban my people from territory we had spent a century building with our own hands. Many of you believed that decision would mark the end of humanity's role among the stars. Instead, it marked the beginning of something none of us fully anticipated, not even my own government at the time. She paused, glancing briefly toward the section of the chamber where Vath Kal sat, older and quieter than he had once been, though his 4 eyes remained as sharp and watchful as ever. We did not respond to that ban with anger, though we felt it. We did not respond with violence, though violence was eventually used against us, and we defended ourselves and those under our protection when it became necessary. We responded, first and always, by trying to understand the rules of this council better than those who wrote them, and by proving, through 2 difficult years of real results, that humanity could be trusted with genuine responsibility among the stars. She gestured toward the massive display behind her, now showing not just the outer rim, but an expanding network of trade routes, diplomatic agreements, and partnerships stretching across a significant portion of known space, connecting dozens of species who had, only 2 years earlier, barely known humanity existed. The outer rim today is safer, more prosperous, and more stable than it has been in generations, not because humanity conquered it, but because humanity chose to govern it fairly, correct our mistakes honestly, and build genuine trust with every species who calls it home. We ask this council today not for special treatment, but for the same full standing already granted to every other species who has proven, through real results rather than empty promises, that they belong among the recognized powers of this galaxy. The council chamber remained quiet for a long moment after Alina finished speaking. Then, slowly, delegates began rising from their seats, one species after another, casting their votes in favor of Earth's full admission. The Renu voted yes immediately, as expected, given their long friendship with human engineers. The Kalissi, having profited enormously from 2 years of expanded human trade, voted yes as well. Even several Dorun delegates, representatives of the very species that had once produced Karnak Dresh's bitter rebellion, cast their votes in favor, moved by the genuine improvements they had witnessed across their own communities since Earth's administration began. When the final count was announced, Earth's admission passed with an overwhelming majority, far larger than the vote that had once banned them from the rim entirely. Vath Kal did not vote against the measure. After a long moment of visible hesitation, watched carefully by delegates across the chamber who remembered his fierce opposition to humanity 2 years earlier, he raised his marker in favor as well, becoming one of the final votes needed to secure Earth's formal admission to the council. After the session ended, Alina Cruz found him waiting quietly near the chamber's main entrance, apart from the celebrating crowd of delegates and reporters gathering to mark the historic occasion. "I did not expect your vote today," she said honestly. "Nor did I until the moment I raised my marker," Vath Kal admitted. "I spent 20 years believing your species represented a threat to the stability of this galaxy, a threat that needed to be contained before it grew too large to control. I was not entirely wrong about the scale of change you would bring. I was wrong, however, about whether that change would ultimately prove beneficial or harmful to the rest of us." "What changed your mind?" Alina asked. Vath Kal considered the question carefully, as he always did. "Every test we placed before your people, economic, political, even violent, you met not with arrogance but with patience and a genuine willingness to learn from your own mistakes. I have watched many species rise to power throughout my long career. Few have done so while remaining willing to admit fault, correct course, and treat those they govern with real fairness, rather than mere convenience. That quality, more than any clever economic strategy, is what ultimately earned my vote today." Alina studied him for a moment, considering her own response carefully. "For what it is worth, Ambassador, I never believed you were driven purely by malice. I believed you were driven by genuine fear for the well-being of species you had spent your career protecting. That fear was not unreasonable, given how little you truly knew about us when this all began. Perhaps, Vothkal said, though I suspect the deeper lesson here is not simply about humanity, but about how easily fear can convince even careful, experienced minds to act against their own long-term interests. I will carry that lesson with me for whatever remains of my career. Far from Sarah Station, across the Outer Rim itself, news of Earth's formal admission to the Galactic Council spread quickly among the communities who had lived through the past 2 years of change most directly. On Haven Station, Bresk Talrun heard the announcement while overseeing a routine safety inspection alongside Sophia Marin, now good friends after 2 years of working closely together. Full council membership, Bresk said, shaking his head slightly in continued disbelief at how far things had come. I still remember when your people were being evicted from this very station, packing up ships as fast as they could manage. A lot can change in 2 years, Sophia said, smiling as she reviewed the final safety certification for the platform they had just inspected together. A lot can change, Bresk agreed. He paused, looking out over the busy docking bays below, filled now with ships from a dozen different species, all moving steadily through territory that had once been the exclusive domain of the Old Rim Alliance guilds. Though I think the most important change was not simply that your people gained power here. It was what you chose to do with that power once you had it. Sophia considered this for a moment. I think that is probably the most important thing anyone ever does with power, honestly. Gaining it is rarely the hard part. Using it well, especially when no one is forcing you to, that is where the real test lies. Back on Earth, President Ibe addressed the nation once more, this time not from a place of crisis or defiance, but from a place of quiet, hard-earned pride. He stood before a larger crowd than his first address 2 years earlier, though his tone remained just as calm and measured as it had always been. 2 years ago, another government tried to remove us from a place we had built with our own hands, believing we did not belong among the recognized powers of this galaxy, he said. Today, that same council has formally welcomed us as full and equal members, not because we forced our way into that position, but because we earned it through patience, through fairness, and through a genuine commitment to doing right by everyone affected by the power we gained. He paused, looking directly into the cameras carrying his words across every human colony, and, for the first time, into the homes of species across dozens of other worlds now connected to Earth through trade, diplomacy, and mutual respect. This achievement does not belong only to our government, or to the clever economists and diplomats who navigated these past 2 difficult years so carefully. It belongs to every worker, human and alien alike, who showed up each day across the Outer Rim, doing their jobs honestly, building trust one small interaction at a time, even when trust felt difficult or uncertain or slow to arrive. We did not simply buy a piece of territory 2 years ago. We earned a place among the stars, and we did it the only way that ever truly lasts. Not through force, but through patience, fairness, and the simple, stubborn choice to keep doing right, even when it would have been easier not to. As his address concluded, celebrations spread quietly but genuinely across human colonies and Rim communities alike. Not the wild, chaotic celebration of a sudden victory, but the steadier, more grounded satisfaction of a difficult journey finally reaching solid ground. On Haven Station, workers from a dozen different species gathered in the station's main concourse to watch the historic announcement together, sharing food, conversation, and a rare, genuine sense of shared accomplishment that stretched far beyond any single species alone. Vothkal, returning to his quarters aboard Sarah Station late that evening, paused briefly at his window, looking out over the star field beyond. Somewhere in the direction of the Outer Rim he had once fought so hard to protect from humanity's arrival. He thought of the long, difficult path that had led to this moment, the mistakes made on every side, the lessons learned slowly and often painfully, and the strange, unexpected partnership that had emerged from what had once seemed like an impossible conflict. The galaxy he had spent his career defending had changed, permanently and irreversibly, reshaped by the quiet, patient rise of a species once dismissed as too young, too reckless, and too dangerous to be trusted with real power. He did not know exactly what the coming years would bring, as humanity's influence continued expanding outward from the rim, forging new partnerships, facing new challenges, and undoubtedly making new mistakes along the way. But for the first time in 20 years, Voth Kal found himself facing that uncertain future not with fear, but with something closer to quiet, cautious hope. The Outer Rim, once a symbol of humanity's exclusion from galactic society, had become instead the foundation of their rightful place among it, earned not through conquest, but through the patient, difficult, and ultimately rewarding work of proving, day after day, exactly what kind of galactic power humanity truly intended to become. And as ships bearing the blue and white flag of Earth continued moving steadily through the stars, carrying trade, diplomacy, and a hard-earned reputation for fairness to every corner of known space they touched, one truth had become undeniable across the entire galaxy. Humanity had arrived to stay, and the stars themselves were better for it. In the days following Earth's formal admission to the Council, Tobias Reyes found himself with something he had not experienced in over 2 years. A quiet evening with nothing urgent demanding his attention. He sat alone in his office on Haven Station, looking over the same busy docking bays Sophia, Marin, and Bresk Talron had watched so many times before, now filled with ships representing dozens of species, all moving steadily through trade routes that had once belonged exclusively to the old Rim Alliance guilds. Dr. Okonkwo joined him, carrying 2 cups of tea, setting one down on the desk beside him before taking a seat across from him. "You look like a man who does not know what to do with himself," she said, a small, knowing smile on her face. 2 years of crisis after crisis, Tobias admitted. "I suppose I forgot what it felt like to simply sit and think rather than react." "Enjoy it," Dr. Okonkwo said. "I suspect it will not last long. Full council membership brings its own set of new challenges. We are no longer simply defending territory we purchased. We are now responsible, in part, for the well-being of the entire galactic order, alongside every other seeded species." Tobias nodded slowly, considering this. "Do you think we are ready for that kind of responsibility?" Dr. Okonkwo took a slow sip of her tea before answering. "I think readiness is not something you achieve once and then possess forever. I think it is something you keep earning, day after day, the same way we earned our place in this rim over the past 2 years. We were not ready for the ban when it happened. We were not ready for the Dominion's claim, or for Karnak Dresh's rebellion, or for a dozen smaller crises along the way. We became ready by facing each challenge honestly, learning from every mistake, and refusing to let fear make our decisions for us. I imagine that pattern will not change simply, because we now hold a permanent seat at the council table." Tobias smiled slightly at this, some of the tension of the past 2 years finally beginning to ease from his shoulders. "My grandmother used to tell me something similar, actually. She said the measure of a person was never whether they avoided every mistake, but whether they kept showing up honestly, again and again, even after making one." "Wise woman," Dr. Okonkwo said. "She would have liked watching all of this unfold," Tobias said quietly, looking out once more at the busy docking bays below, filled with the steady, ordinary rhythm of a territory that had, against every expectation 2 years earlier, become something stable, prosperous, and genuinely shared among the many different peoples who now called it home. Elsewhere across the newly expanded web of trade routes stretching outward from the rim, smaller stories continued unfolding quietly, each one a small piece of the larger transformation now reshaping galactic society. A young Renu engineer, inspired by stories of human perseverance during the Haven Station crisis, applied for and received a position working directly alongside Earth's shipbuilding teams, eager to learn from a partnership she had grown up admiring. A Phaeax shipping company, once struggling under the weight of new safety regulations, had grown into one of the most successful independent trading operations in the entire Rim, thanks to the low-interest loan program Tobias and Dr. Okonkwo had established during those difficult early months. Even Grazik Fen, the bitter Khaleesi trader once recruited to testify against Earth's administration, found himself, 2 years later, running a modest but steadily growing cargo fleet, his upgraded ships now among the most reliable operating along the busy Haven Station trade corridor. He rarely spoke of his brief involvement with Voth Kal's failed political maneuvering, preferring instead to focus on the steady, honest work that had ultimately rebuilt his fortunes far more successfully than resentment ever could have. Far beyond the Rim itself, in systems that had only recently established formal contact with the wider galaxy, smaller civilizations watched humanity's rise with a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope. If a species once banned entirely from a region of space could rise, within just 2 years, to become a fully respected member of the galaxy's oldest political institution, perhaps the old assumptions about which species deserved power, and which did not, were not quite as fixed and unchangeable as many had long believed. On the final evening of that historic week, Elena Cruz stood once more at the window of her private quarters aboard Sarah Station, looking out over the same star field she had studied so many times before, during quieter and far more dangerous moments alike. She thought of the long, uncertain path that had led humanity to this point, a path filled with clever economic maneuvering, difficult negotiations, unexpected violence, and countless small, ordinary acts of fairness and honesty that had together built something far stronger than any single victory could have achieved alone. She did not know exactly what challenges awaited humanity next, as their influence continued expanding outward into a galaxy far larger and more complicated than the small corner of the outer rim where this journey had first begun. But she found herself, much like Voth Kal had admitted only days earlier, facing that uncertain future with quiet, steady confidence rather than fear. Humanity had been banned from the stars once, and had answered that rejection not with anger, but with patience, fairness, and the stubborn, quiet determination to prove, through real results rather than empty words, exactly what kind of neighbor they intended to be among the countless other peoples who called this galaxy home. Whatever came next, Elena Cruz was confident humanity would meet it the same way they had met everything else across these past 2 remarkable years, honestly, carefully, and together.